I listened to a podcast called the Lights On podcast with Carl Lentz. Now, Carl Lentz was an ex-pastor who went through a very public controversy, some infidelity, some other things. And so the podcast has nothing to do with employment. But I've always liked Carl when he was a pastor, and I started listening to his podcast because I liked him as a person outside of him being a pastor, and I've learned a lot of amazing things. This podcast, he was talking to a life coach, and while they were talking, they began talking about taking ownership of your life. And I learned how that applied to a job search, a job opportunity, and your situation with your career. And taking ownership of your role that you play in your career. Now, what does that look like? Let's look at my situation. So I've already stated that I loved where I was. I've already stated that I wanted to be there for a long time. And I stated that I thought that I was in the right place at the right time for me and for my family. And then it didn't work out. Now, what does taking ownership look like? If I step back from that situation, I have the ability to look at the situation as a whole. But as I look and I take ownership of where I was and where maybe I could have contributed, I can see where they may have needed to make that decision for themselves. And thus, I am not a victim of them just not liking me or them just screwing me over or whatever you may say to yourself when a company lets you go. I'm not that. I'm able to take ownership of that. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. This is a special episode, and the reason why it's a special episode is for a couple of reasons. One, as of last Friday, September 5th, I hit 1 year of unemployment. And in that year, a lot of interesting things have happened, some great things, some things I've had to learn, some things that are coming to light as we get close to my new start date at my new job next Monday. And because of those things that I have learned, I thought I would recap my year of unemployment and the things that I have learned in hopes that it helps you along your way in your journey of finding your next opportunity. So what are those things? Well, first, let's talk about the moment you get let go from a company. And now there is an assumption here that you didn't leave the company voluntarily and that you suddenly got let go. But even if it wasn't so sudden, maybe you were given 2 or 3 months of runway before you were let go. Well, let's just say you were let go suddenly. The first thing I've learned in talking to guests and going through this process for the third time is that it's important for you to evaluate where you are mentally. Being let go is sudden, it's traumatic, it feels personal, it feels like an attack on you. And if you don't take the time to evaluate those emotions, whether it be sadness, maybe you're sad that you got let go, you really enjoyed your job. That was the case with me. I loved the company I was at. I loved the people that I was around. I loved the work that we were doing. And I felt like I was going to be able to make a big impact on that company had I been given a chance to be there longer. And maybe you're sad about that opportunity leaving you. That's okay. And you need to take the time to process that. Now, maybe you are mad that you were let go, and that's okay too. Maybe you're upset at the circumstances, especially if it is a mass layoff that you have no control over. Maybe it's market conditions. Maybe it is a company being in financial trouble that you didn't have any part of. You only helped the company grow. And maybe you're mad about the situation, and that's okay too. Feel that anger. But what's important is to take the time to feel it and have the ability to let it go. Because letting those feelings linger does not help you find your next opportunity. In fact, I would argue that it hampers it. because you're stuck in a cycle of victimhood, feeling like a company did something to you, and that doesn't help you when you are in front of another opportunity. So the first thing I've learned is that you have to be able to let go of that last opportunity. Now that brings me to the next thing that I have learned over the course of my time here. I listened to a podcast called the Lights On podcast with Carl Lentz. Now, Carl Lentz was an ex-pastor who went through a very public controversy, some infidelity, some other things. And so the podcast has nothing to do with employment. But I've always liked Carl when he was a pastor, and I started listening to his podcast because I liked him as a person outside of him being a pastor. And I've learned a lot of amazing things. This podcast, he was talking to a life coach. And while they were talking, they began talking about taking ownership of your life. And I learned how that applied to a job search, a job opportunity, in your situation with your career, and taking ownership of your role that you play in your career. Now, what does that look like? Let's look at my situation. So I've already stated that I loved where I was. I've already stated that I wanted to be there for a long time. And I stated that I thought that I was in the right place at the right time for me and for my family. And then it didn't work out. Now, what does taking ownership look like? If I step back from that situation, I have the ability to look at the situation as a whole. And when I do that, I look at the fact that I had been 10 years removed from the oil and gas industry. I had started out in oil and gas, then moved to manufacturing, was in wastewater treatment, had done a bunch of other things, and hadn't been in the oil and gas industry for about 10 years. So even though I had extensive experience as a project manager, which is really what they were looking for, I didn't have an extended experience in oil and gas. So the company took a chance with me of hiring me in a consulting role for an industry that I was coming back into, which was amazing at the time. And it looked like it was going to be an amazing fit because with what they do, and I had been in IT for a while at that point, I understood IT principles. I understood a lot of things in that realm, but I was coming back into oil and gas. So I was also having to learn at the same time. So they took a chance. And even though I was doing the work of getting myself back into the oil and gas, I was buying books, I was listening to lectures, I was watching YouTube videos, I was asking a lot of questions. When you're in a consulting company, you're behind the eight ball. It's hard to catch up. And I think the company was able to see that even though I was a good fit with the value that I could bring, with what they needed at the time, I may not have been the best fit. And that's okay. But as I look and I take ownership of where I was and where maybe I could have contributed, I can see where they may have needed to make that decision for themselves. And thus, I am not a victim of them just not liking me or them just screwing me over, or whatever you may say to yourself when a company lets you go. I'm not that. I'm able to take ownership of that. The other thing that I was able to take ownership of is I've always admired the way my wife goes about business. My wife was also faced with a layoff at the same time that I was. So there was a chance that both of us was going to be unemployed at the same time, which is obviously scary. And my wife was able to have a network that allowed her to find a job in the amount of time she had to find one before she was let go from her previous company. And even though she did get a layoff, she also got an offer. But the thing that I've always admired about her is her approach to a new job. She went in confident in who she was and willing to take on literally everything that they threw at her, regardless of what it was. If it was something that was the bottom of the barrel, her exact words to me were, I'm going to make sure the bottom of that barrel is cleaner than it's ever been, is spotless. That task is taken care of in an amazing fashion so that maybe they give me something a little higher, a little higher, a little higher. When I look at my approach in my last company, I was trying to be part of the team. I was asking a lot of questions. I had a lot of knowledge that was very useful, and I did share that from time to time. But I was also trying to stick within their framework. And so I asked a lot of questions, and I didn't take the ownership that I would normally take in my last opportunity. And so as I go into this new opportunity, the first thing I'm doing is taking ownership of myself, my contributions, and the value that I bring to this company. Value has become the number one thing that I am looking to provide for a company. I want to provide the maximum amount of value for this next opportunity and make myself indispensable because of the value that I bring to this company. I've already had discussions on that. I'm already looking at certifications that I can get that only bolsters my resume, bolsters my knowledge, and I am continually learning and continually getting better and continually adding additional value to this company in order to make myself indispensable and make myself someone that is the best hire they have ever made. That is my goal. I want to be the best hire that my new boss has ever made. And that comes from introspection and observation of the people around me and my career to this point. I turned 40 in January, and my goal is for this to be the last interview sessions that I go through and that I'm with this company for the rest of my career. And in order to do that, it is constant and never-ending improvement of myself, of my career, learning my position, learning everything that I need to know about the industry, getting better at all times, and working extremely hard at providing that value to the company. Another thing that has constantly come up in this podcast is the value of human connection, whether that be growing your network while you are working or while you're going through the journey of finding your next opportunity. Networking is extremely important. Having a mentor is extremely important for a lot of reasons. But there are ways to go about this that is a better approach, in my opinion. So many times when you are looking for a professional contact, especially if you are in transition like I was, it is so easy to make those interactions with other humans transactional. And you know what I'm talking about when I say transactional, right? You go to a restaurant and you deal with a cashier at that restaurant, and they're doing their job, and they're probably, hopefully, doing their job really well. But that interaction is transactional. They take your order, you give them money, you get your food. It's transactional. And so many times when we try to find professional contacts, we make that interaction transactional. And what do I mean by that? What would that look like in a professional contact setting? Well, you're looking for a job, right? That's probably pretty obvious. You have an open to work banner on LinkedIn. You're getting a hold of people out of the blue and all of those things. Well, if you approach that conversation with the of, I need this person to help me find a job, you're going to start doing things like only asking them if they know of an opportunity, putting the burden on them to help you find something, right? Well, if that person doesn't know you and you haven't earned that kind of request from them, it can be very difficult to have a professional contact help you find that next opportunity. But if we change our approach and we make it a value-based conversation, now you're changing the dynamic of your relationship with that person. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's look at a situation. Let's say there is a company where you live that you have wanted to work at for a long time. There's a few companies here that I've heard are amazing companies. In fact, I got a chance to interview at one of them and I was very excited. I didn't end up getting the opportunity, but it was a company that I knew was an amazing place to be. They were doing amazing work and I really wanted to work. Now let's take that situation and let's apply what I just said about the value-based conversation with a professional context. So I know that I want to work there. I know that they hire project managers and they work in a realm that I have worked in before. This particular company was also a consulting company in the IT realm that I had been at previously in the last 2 jobs. So I knew what the job was. Now, if I find somebody who is doing that job, another project manager at that company, a hiring manager, maybe a vice president, and I reach out to them on LinkedIn and I tell them that I would like to meet with them to discuss their company, what they do so that I can learn. I've already taken some of the defenses down by saying I'm looking to learn. I didn't say in that message that I'm looking for another opportunity. I am looking to hopefully work there someday. All I said is that I'm looking to learn, right? I've taken some of that defensiveness down because maybe they know right then that they don't have anything open. But if I'm just looking to learn, now maybe they're willing to help me. And if they agree to meet you for coffee or a happy hour or meet them at their office, now it's on you to do some research. You need to research that person. You need to research that position. You need to research that company and try to find where might be some holes that they have in the company that you know that the value that you bring could help fill, right? So now when you meet with them and you get past the pleasantries of getting to know each other a little bit, asking how they're doing, asking how they got into that position, all of those things. If you have a question that you can ask them about a potential hole that they might have, or even if you ask them directly, what are some of the potential holes that your company faces? Some potential problems that you encounter currently. And if they're willing to tell you that, or you've done your research and you already know that, now you can start talking about how the value that you bring to this position could help fill those holes. That conversation's different. Now you're trying to help them solve their problems. You're changing it. You don't expect anything from them. Don't go into it expecting them to say, oh my gosh, you're going to be perfect. But if you go into it and saying, I want to help you solve your issue, that's a different conversation. And then based on what they say, do some follow-up. Figure out if they tell you a hole that maybe you don't know a solution to right at that moment, go back and research, how could I fill this hole? And maybe reply to them with, hey, after I went home and I thought about this a little bit, here's what I think you could do. And even if they don't say, well, you would be perfect for this and a position opens up and that would be amazing if that happened. But you're changing the way you're talking to them and showing them that you know how to help them solve their issues. They're more likely to, even if they don't know of a position, be thinking of you when they hear of another position. They're now going to become your advocate because you're willing to solve their issue. And if there's one consistent theme for this podcast with every guest I've had, is the importance of human connection and value-based conversations. LinkedIn is amazing. It's an amazing way to find professional contacts, to build a network, to look for what's open. But in this job market, LinkedIn has not been the best way to find that next opportunity. And what I mean by that is just applying on LinkedIn, especially easy apply. There's too many people applying right now, and you're literally playing the lottery if you just simply send in your resume through an easy apply, or even if it's not an easy apply and you go through an application, if you're only doing that, in a lot of ways, you're playing the lottery, because there's a lot of people that are sending in their resumes and not all of them are qualified. But if that person is now having to deal with 500 resumes, you're one of 500. And hopefully your resume stands out, but you don't know that it will. So it's more important than ever to try to connect with somebody and have them be your advocate, because you have had value-based conversations with them that wasn't expecting them to to provide you with a job, but you're showing that you're willing to add value to their company and they're willing to be your advocate. So that's been an overarching theme of this podcast. Another thing that I will say that has come out of my doing this podcast while I've been on this journey has been, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of people, more than you will think, that will be willing to help you find your next opportunity. Don't hesitate to reach out to people when you are going through this journey. If it's someone that was an old customer, I reached out to old customers of mine. I reached out to old colleagues of mine. I reached out to old bosses of mine. I reached out to friends of mine that I knew were somewhat in the realm of what I do, and asked them to think of me if something came up. There were a lot of times when I didn't hear anything back, and that's okay. But there are more people than you think, and they don't have to have known you that well to be willing to help you. Of all the interviews, and I've been through the final round of interviews, I would say 5 times in this journey. And of all the people that I reached out to, one of those interviews was a former colleague of mine. And I worked with them some. I didn't work with them directly. This person actually helped me out a lot when in a former job that I had, and knew that I was more than willing to go above and beyond my position to accomplish a task, and was more than willing to recommend me for a position in their company that was opening up. And I got interviews from that, and I got to the final round. And it was a hard interview session. It ended up going 7 rounds, and I ultimately didn't get it for reasons that didn't really have anything to do with me. They were trying to decide what direction they wanted to go and what they were looking for, and I was really early in the process, and they decided that they were looking for something that I wasn't, and that's okay. But that was a connection that I had of a colleague that I didn't work directly with a lot, but I got to know. And I reached out to them and they were more than willing. I reached out to a lot of recruiters, and recruiters can be great and can be tough to deal with. And it depends on the level of recruiter you're talking to, whether they're new or they're more senior, depending on where they are in the company and what their tasks are, whether they are the ones making the relationships with the clients or they're just getting a database. Those conversations can be really difficult, but it's important to reach out to them and give them the information that they need from you and be honest with them and tell them what they're looking for. And before I go any further, that reminds me of something. When you're really early on in the stages, after you've gone through dealing with your emotion, I would highly recommend that you make a plan. If there are target companies that you want to go for, write those down. Make a list. Understand what is the base salary that you need to make in order to pay the bills. There's a number there. Understand what that number is. It may be less than what you were currently making, which will tell you the bottom salary that you're willing to accept. Evaluate whether or not you are wanting to do something different. Whether you think it is or not, being in transition and being in a job search is an opportunity, because you have an opportunity to decide what direction you now want to go. You're literally looking at a fork in the road. Do you want to continue down the path you were going? Do you enjoy it? That's amazing if you do. Keep going down that path. You know what your market value is in that profession, and you know what you can probably get. You may have to take a little bit less, but you don't have to take a major pay cut? Or are you wanting to go a completely different direction? Do you have an opportunity? Do you have a skill set that would translate into something else that you know you would love to do? It's an opportunity for you to do that, but you have to evaluate and understand, I'm starting over. I may be starting at the bottom again. I may have 15 years experience as a project manager, but if I wanted to get into something else, I may have less than 5 years. So I may be starting lower than you would be as what you would currently been doing. Understand that. Understand if that's acceptable in where you are in your life, with your family, with your current financial situation, whatever that may be. Make that evaluation. And when you have that evaluation and you have your targets and you have your goals, now you can really go after them. So when you're speaking with recruiters, know what you're looking for. Vagueness doesn't help you. Having a set plan, a set thing that you're shooting towards helps a recruiter find a good opportunity for you, because they know what you're looking for and they know what your value is. They know what you're good at. They know what you're trying to improve on. They know and can be your advocate. And I had recruiters give me interviews that I got to final rounds of and I didn't ultimately get. Another thing I'll say based on my experiences, and I see this a lot, and I want to address this because I keep seeing it on LinkedIn, and I think it's a mistake when I see people post this. Understand that a no is not always a definite no from a company. Understand that maybe the situation isn't aligning right then, but maybe you're planting a seed that's going to come to fruition at some point. Let me give you an example based on my experience. The company that I'm going to start at on Monday, I actually initially reached out to them in January of 2025. I saw an open position that they had. I had a former vendor that I used to deal with that was working at that company, and I reached out to them and found out who I needed to contact. And I contacted them directly. I didn't actually send in an application through applicant tracking system. I didn't just send out my resume. I found the hiring manager and I found the HR representative that was in charge of that company, and I reached out to them that way through LinkedIn. I sent in my resume to them directly through LinkedIn, and I got to the final round back in February. But at that time, the project that I would have been working on fell through. It happens. It's a construction company. If you don't have a project, you don't have justification to bring on somebody, and it happens. But here's what I see people do on LinkedIn. And I've been seeing this more and more. And I have a lot of, before I say this, I have a lot of compassion and a lot of empathy for the person who is making this post, but I also think they're making a mistake. I've seen people post on LinkedIn blasting the process with a potential company. And I've seen them, if it wasn't a great experience, post things like, I went through all this and then they didn't hire anybody and you're putting it on blast. And even though they're not mentioning that company by name, that company, if they see that post, clearly knows you're talking about them. You're burning that bridge. And here's why I say that. Because this company that I talked to in February didn't have a position then. And even though I was disappointed at that time, I didn't burn a bridge. I said, thank you very much. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I'm really rooting for you as a company because I like your values. I like you guys as personally, and I like who you are. And I really feel like I could provide some great value at this company if there was ever an opportunity. And I didn't hear anything from them until July when they had another opening pop up. But they remembered me and I didn't burn that bridge. And it's important to know that you have no idea what can happen in the future. So don't burn bridges. Take that rejection gracefully, and you never know what can happen. And sometimes when you least expect it is when they may call you back. What I want to get across with this podcast is a few things. And I've said these things a few times on this podcast, and I know it may be redundant for me to say it again, but I do want to say it again, is that one, When you're going through a job search journey, you're not alone. You're not the only one. And there are a lot of people that are experiencing the same thing at this point. There's a lot of people that are willing to help you while you go throughout this journey, whether it be others that are going through the journey or it be people who can potentially help you find the next opportunity. But if you get into a mindset of, I'm the only one going through this, and you start isolating yourself and you start getting down on yourself and in your feelings and all of these things, you're not helping yourself. So that's one, you're not alone. Two, I want to emphasize this and I want you to hear me. If you're watching this on YouTube, I want you to see my face. If you're just listening to it, please hear this. You are not a failure. Being let go from a company doesn't mean that you are a failure. It can feel like that, especially if it's not a mass layoff and you're the only one who was let go for some reason. Maybe your job became redundant or they just couldn't justify having you anymore, or whatever the situation may be. It can feel like you failed. You're not a failure. Even if you did fail at that job, let's say you did something and you got fired because you made a mistake. You may have failed, but you're not a failure. And it's easy to let that thought creep into your mind, but you got to get rid of that thought. You're not a failure. You will find another opportunity. And based on your experience of the search, of the reflection that we talked about earlier, of all of those things, you're going to thrive at that company because now they're getting the best version of you that has existed in your career. You're better now than you were when you were at your last position. And if you can remember that, you have an opportunity to thrive when you find that next position. So you're not a failure. 3, I'm going to say it again, and I know I harped on it earlier, but I'm going to say it one more time. There are more people than you think that are willing to help you. Go back to some of the past episodes that we've had here. Look up some of the people that have been guests on here. A lot of them are career coaches, are life coaches, are recruiters, are hiring managers. Reach out to them. If for nothing else, to develop that contact. Ask for help. Let go of your pride and ask for some help. There are people more than you think that are willing to help you. And the last thing I want to say is, it is important to constantly be evaluating yourself. Take courses. There are free courses. There are cheap courses with like Udemy or Coursera or a lot of others. I know Harvard University offers free courses on a lot of different subjects. Take this opportunity to learn and grow as an employee. Invest in yourself and learn and grow so that when you get that next opportunity, you can be the best version of yourself. You know more. You've learned new techniques. I'm a project manager. Things evolve. The way projects were handled in 2015 is different than they are now. AI is available. There's new ways of dealing with project teams, with dealing with clients, to dealing with situations that come up. There's always new information you can learn. There's new certifications you can try to get. There's YouTube videos galore on different things that have to do with your profession. Look them up. Look up new software. Look up new techniques. Look up all the different things so that when you come into that new position, you are adding value from day one. But that's it. That's the journey that I've been on. The last thing that I want to say is try to find something that you can do for others while you're going through this search. And the reason why I say that is it keeps your mind focused on something other than yourself, keeps you from sitting and dwelling in your situation, getting yourself down, feeling like a failure, all of those things. If you can focus on other people, whether that be volunteer opportunities, find something you can do in the evenings, For me, it was, I wanted to help others while I was going through the same thing. So I wanted to do this podcast. This has helped me learn. This has helped me help others in their search. And it's kept me from dwelling in the fact that I've still been looking for over a year, which for me is double the amount of time it took the previous 2 times. This has been tough. But this, and finding ways to make things about other people, has kept me focused and allowed me to continue down this path. Now, look, I am not naive to people's situations. I know that in some situations, it can be very tough to be let go from a company. You're taking away your income. You're taking away your security. And you may have to find a part-time job while you search. And if that is the case, then I applaud you for doing that. Take ownership of your situation. Do what you have to do to take care of your family, to take care of yourself, so that when you get in front of that potential new opportunity, you are the best version of yourself sitting across the table from them or across the screen from them. Because the one thing that you will kick yourself over is if you do get an interview and you just don't present the best version of yourself to them for whatever reason, that is the thing that will eat at you the most. Because if when you're sitting there across from somebody and you present the best version of yourself, you say the things you want to say, you answer their questions with the proper tone, you answer it the way you wanted to answer it, you presented yourself exactly how you wanted to present yourself, and now you leave it just to their decision. And you can live with the opportunity, you can live with their decision if you've presented the best version of yourself. But if you didn't, and you didn't give yourself that full shot, that will eat at you. And so if there's anything that I want to happen, it's for when you get in front of that next opportunity, you've done all the work. You've worked on yourself mentally. You've worked on yourself physically. You feel good about yourself, and you present the best version of yourself to that company when you get that opportunity. If there's anything I want to have happen, it's that. That'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. I really appreciate if you lasted the 40 minutes to this point. I really appreciate you listening. And I appreciate every time you hit that play button. It is an honor. And if you've listened to multiple of these episodes, and I highly encourage you to go back and listen to other episodes. And if you have done that, I can't thank you enough for that. And if you know someone who's going through a job search journey themselves and they're struggling, or maybe they're not struggling, but you still think that some of this information would be good for them, I highly request that you send this podcast to them so that maybe they can get some information, some encouragement, and be able to find and thrive in that next opportunity. But we'll see you soon. We're lining up some new guests, and I can't wait to bring them to you, but we'll see you soon.